evening, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm so excited to have you all here this evening to hear about Mina. Few people know as much about growth as Mina. Before she was the CTO at Paradox Interactive, and most recently, or right now, at Flight Radar. Two companies that have literally exploded. And Flight Radar, I say it because I know you won't, is one of the most efficient companies in Sweden when it comes to profitability, and has grown crazy with very, very few people. And I think that's worth an applause. We have exits over here, and if the oxygen drops, I will adjust the fan. But no, I will give the word to you, Mina. Personally, I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Proxify, also the janitor here. If you feel you need something extra to drink, I'll be sit here and just wave, and I can actually come to you and serve it. And now over to the Mina. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks a lot for inviting me here. So my name is Mina. I'm CTO at Flight Radar, as Victor mentioned. Do we have any Flight Radar users here?
Yes.
Good, good. But unfortunately, I'm going to disappoint you. I'm not going to talk so much about our products. But fortunately, we have a networking afterwards, so we can talk more about our features. But I'm going to mention some other things, as Victor mentioned, regarding Flight Radar. So I'm going to reveal some interesting details about the company. Long time ago, I started my career as a developer. I worked, in fact, for many, many years as being C++ backend developer and software architect. And I was so happy working in my tech world. And my main goal was to design software systems in that way that creates a value for the customers. And then one day, my very clever husband said, Mina, if you really want to create value for your customers, you need to learn a little bit about the business perspective on things. And I said, oh no, I'm so happy living in my tech world. But in fact, I must admit that he had the right that time. So I learned something a little bit about business perspective. And although I still had the same goal, how to design and create software products which creates value for the customers, I started noticing some new things at the company where I worked for, or the company that I monitored and observed. And then I realized that many companies, when they're passing that growth phase, in fact, there are some patterns that are repeating. But let's go back and explain what I meant, to see maybe you were part of such journey. Imagine you have thinking you're an entrepreneur, you want to start a new business, you're using maybe business model canvas, and you say, I'm going to do this build this product or this service, so it's going to be my main value proposition. And you deliver that product to the market, and fortunately it shows it was a good market fit, right? Then you're so empowered to go to investors with a good elevator pitch and say, oh, you see, it's good market fit, the clients want to have my product, and they say, oh, great, here's the money, now you can invest in your company. And then you feel, oh, great, now I have so many growth plans. And in order to grow the business, you need to grow your organization, right? You recognize that story? You were on such a journey? And then what do you do next? You create very realistic plans. You say, I'm going to hire 100 software engineers within 2 months, right? Because you have a lot of money and you want to grow your business quickly. What I have noticed, so it depends on the company. Sometimes it happens just a couple of years later. Sometimes maybe it happens 10 years later. But all of a sudden, you realize your organization became so complex and difficult and you can't manage it. You also noticed I recruited all those 100 engineers in order to speed up the product development. But for some reason, although I have a very big organization, the lead time, the delivery is just slower and slower. Your organization became very slow. And you see that revenue is maybe not declining yet, but costs have started exceeding the revenue. What happened? What happened? When I saw that story repeating in many different companies, I was thinking, like, many companies are doing exactly the same, I'm not going to say mistakes, but steps in their growth, in their rapid growth phase. Maybe there is some other smarter way how you can grow your business and your organization. I'm not an AI, I'm just a human being, but because I was so interested in that subject, I trained my model on many, many cases by both joining the companies and observing. And here I have some ideas how you can avoid some of those typical pitfalls that will lead to the scenario that I just explained. Of course, it's very high level, and we are going to take a look from 4 different perspectives. How you build your organizational structure, how you grow your business, how you do with the leadership, which leadership requires within that growth phase, and technology, of course. So let's start taking a look from the organizational structure, and now we will focus only on generic growth. We are not going to analyze M&As because it's outside of the scope for this presentation. When you're recruiting new people, usually you build your teams, your organization, and very often end up in this organizational structure, right? You're grouping teams are growing, then you're putting managers and adding layers. So usually during the rapid growth, it ends up in this type of organization that is called vertically scaled because you are scaling up. What is the challenge with this type of organizational structure? Anyone has any idea? Is there any challenges?
Communication.
Yes, communication. Then business, or not only business, all decisions, because each decision, because you have a lot of managerial layers, so in order to get approval, it needs to go up and down. So it takes a lot of time. And such organization becomes so complex. So I would say, even if you grow the organization, don't build vertically scaled tall organizations. Try to scale out, build horizontally scaled. What do I mean with that? You have recruited your people, you need to organize your teams and build the organization, right? So you need to put managers somewhere. But from my experience, here are the typical mistakes that people are doing and which I wouldn't recommend. Typically, when you grow organization, you think, oh, I will recruit the managers and they will build the teams. But then in that way, you automatically are adding those layers that slow down your organization. So try to be much more careful and thinking, like, let that team grow and maybe be on the edge that one engineering manager can handle maybe 10, 12, even 15 direct reports, and then start adding new managers. I saw many organizations that just have like small teams, 2, 3 people, and putting manager, and then manager on that, and then you easily end up in this vertically scaled organization. So you don't have to promote people to become managers directly. You can start with being a tech lead. So of course you cannot prevent the growth, but you can grow slowly, that you don't end up directly in this structure. Also, there is another challenge. As soon as you have promoted some individual contributor to become a manager, if you're doing some reorganization or restructuring of organization, you can't remove that role, right? it's not so often that you say, do you want to be again a software engineer or individual contributor? It happens, but it's much more difficult. So that's why you need to be careful with promoting to the managerial roles. Then there is another thing, because we are still human beings and not using AI to grow our organization. There is something in our brains when we are planning organization, we are always thinking, oh, it should be symmetrical. I don't know if this is a consequence of our analytic brains, but organization does not have to be symmetrical. What do I mean with that? For example, you have one manager and team of 15 people, and you feel like it's too many people for one person to handle. In many cases, you automatically think, oh, I should divide that team in 2 teams, give one manager each. But you don't have to do that. You can say, for those maybe 6, 7 engineers, I can put one manager, but other people can still report to existing manager. So of course you added one managerial layer, but you are slowly growing the organization, so you give space when you add even the second manager, you don't get directly the second layer of a managerial layer. Also, there are different ways how you can build organization, and building a metrics organization was very popular maybe for 5-10 years ago. From my experience, I would recommend to avoid metrics organizations. Why? If you go back to that saying, too many cooks spoil the soup. Usually in metrics organization, I mean when you try to separate people manager role from the business manager role, and you say, oh, it's perfect, those teams, they will have a people manager who will take care about their well-being and someone who will lead the business. But in many cases, when you divide that, then all of a sudden, for the things that are not going well, no one is responsible, because it's so easy to say, oh, the another person should take that responsibility. So if you don't have one single person responsible for the team, it's easy that you end up in that no one takes responsibility. And it becomes exponential growth of alignment meetings, because all those managers need to align with each other. And it costs you time and energy. What can you do instead? Recommendation is, I really strongly believe that the same person should be both responsible for people management, managerial responsibility, and for the business delivery. Why? When we had that division between people managers and business managers, people managers, they lost then sense for business urgency. And it's not good for the company, because of course, people need to feel good, but you need to have that little bit sense of urgency. We need to deliver this thing. Also, what I noticed, those people manager, if you put them aside from business or tech or that expertise, they develop much more being HR people. And then you can't put them back into business, like they're not, they have been for a long time outside of the business. So in that way, you haven't developed that person well, because usually then you don't know how to develop him or her further. And that's why I recommend, I know that many of you know what it means to be T-shaped people, that you have one speciality, and then that you have a more holistic overview of everything that is happening. But that's why when you put both people managerial responsibility and business or technology delivery responsibility in the same person, then you develop a person to be P or pie in English shaped. And I strongly believe. And I know that people who are applying that, separating people manager from a delivery manager, saying, oh, it's difficult to recruit. Maybe it's difficult to recruit, but you can develop your existing managers instead, right? You can invest in them to become P-shaped. When I said you should develop your people, it's very important how you define career paths, growth paths for people in your organization. When I talk about software development, even hardware development, because we are doing some hardware development at Flytrader, usually I'm talking about those 3 areas that intersect technology, leadership, and business and products. And those dots are maybe like just a visualization about the roles that you have at your company. If you just enable career path to become manager, what will end up? So if you define all your roles, that the only way how you can develop as a person is to become a manager, everyone will end up here at the manager. And what should you do with them? Then you just introduce then another managerial layer and saying now there is another senior engineering manager or VP or head and so on. And then you block. So instead, develop at the same time career paths for specialists. And it's really very good. Why? First, in that way, you don't enforce people to become manager and then eventually you get a lot of managerial layers. And then also, all people don't want to become managers. But unfortunately, if they don't have any other career path, they're going to go through managers and it's not good for them, it's not good for the company. So it's very important when you're building your organization to think about career paths and enable both, of course, managerial paths, but also career paths for the specialists. Okay, it was some mistakes. I hope that you agree with me or learned something new.
Yes. Question on that. Is there a risk that you become too heavily reliant on those specialists? Because if they want to leave and you're a really small organization, aren't they really difficult to replace?
Very good question, and maybe we can take it afterwards. So I'm not saying that you should have only one specialist per domain or per thing. When I said specialist, that if someone wants to develop and continue being software engineer or product designer, you don't there must be career path for that area to go deep in that specialization. But it's a very relevant question. Maybe we can say that for the later.
Is it time for questions or
We have a Q&A session in the very end.
Maybe we can say yes.
But feel free to ask if it's related to specifically this topic, like in not understanding an element, for example.
Good, thanks. So we continue with the business side. As I said, I know many of you are engineers and maybe not completely interested in business side, but I wanted to show you some things that I learned and how it helped me as being a tech expert. That business perspective opened my eyes, and that's why I want to share some things from that business side. If you go back to that, you started your company, you had a great idea, you find a great market fit. Usually, business people are saying you are entering the market, and there is something that is called the S-curve that shows the development of any market. At the beginning, if there is if you introduce completely new product or service, you say the market is young, there is not any other competitors doing the same. Then when you start doing your services or products, other smart people start copying you. So the market is growing, maybe the need are growing, like with the AI tools nowadays, the market is in a very growing state. After a while, when there are many companies delivering similar type of product services, the market becomes pretty mature, so it becomes so important to fight that competition. And I know that some people in the room attended my talk about blue ocean strategy, how you can find a market niche, but it's outside of this topic, but we can talk about that after this meeting. And maybe the market becomes very declining after many years. What does it mean for you? So when you started the company or the company is growing, it means that rapid growth is usually related to that market growth phase. And you have your core value proposition, your offering products or services, and those big dots illustrate the revenue that you create from that. So assuming that you are growing and you are a successful company. But you need to think that growth market is not going to last forever. It is going to reach that maturity state, right? When there are other companies are doing the same thing and you need to fight for your market share. When you ask, how should I do? Then everyone is saying you should innovate, you should prepare yourself for the future. And some basic things from innovation management, you can map everything that you are doing, your product services, like the main revenue drivers, that's why they're such big dots. There are those settlers, value imitation, you're producing a similar type of products because you know the market needs those products. But everyone recommends, at the same time, when you are doing your main revenue drivers, you should start seeing how you can innovate, improve the value offering, the value improvements with some new initiatives that will grow to the main revenue drivers in the future. And you even need to have pioneers, a very completely different type of experiments so that you prepare yourself for the future. So it's from the innovation management. And many companies where I worked for or when I observed them, they did everything like that, by the book. But many of them ended up that they enable innovation. It was a lot of innovative projects, innovation funnels, people are innovating and so on. And then they realized there are too many projects running in parallel, and many of them got stuck along the way. And then all of a sudden, senior leadership team is coming and saying, oh, now our revenue has started declining, we need to stop and pause all innovation projects. And you're trying to tell them, oh, please, please, but my project, it will lead to some really new, good offering to the market. Shouldn't we spend the time and evaluate each project, which one will really lead to that successful innovation? But then they're saying, yes, but now it's too late. We should have done that before, because now we need to take care about recover our revenue, and we are going to stop all innovation projects at the company. Did it happen to you? Do you recognize that story?
Mm.
Good. So my
2 minutes Proxify looking at.
So I observed that there are two typical scenarios. What can you do in advance that you don't end up in this scenario? Coming back to my dots and revenue drivers, some companies, although they should innovate, they're afraid and they're sticking too much to their core value proposition products. They're not investing enough, although the market is getting saturated and asking for new type of products. And then revenue will decline. Another scenario that is also typical, that everything is going well, everyone is asking for your product, but you're so obsessed about innovation that you forget your core products. But market is still growing and then revenue will decline. So there are two typical scenarios that you should bear in mind and think not only about innovation, but also in relation with the market situation. Because many people and also in innovation, it's important to emphasize, innovation should be done both bottom up and top down. So there are many engineering teams that are proposing innovative ideas, but please bear that in mind in order to guarantee that your idea is going to be successful. We continue with the leadership. Leadership is such a huge topic. But now I would like just to focus on some things that are relevant for that rapid growth phase at many companies. Maybe it's my version of the diagram that you probably saw, how you should align autonomy and alignment at the companies. And here I divided different phases of the companies. When you have startups, usually they are high on autonomy. You have a lot of motivated people, but they are kind of running in different directions. Usually you don't have a clear vision, company vision, what they want to achieve. You have some good business idea, that's why the company is growing and successful. And then from startup, usually company develops to this hierarchical structure or to this business agility. Bureaucratic companies, fortunately, we don't have many in Sweden, so we can jump over, but I can just explain that HIPO, it means highest paid person in organization who are sitting on all the decisions. But we can skip for that. So the goal is, when you are in the growth phase, you started from startup, and it should be like that, it's normal. You want directly to come to this business agility state, not to go to the hierarchical state. Why? Here is typical. When you have a startup, you think, oh, now I want to grow the company, I want to introduce the structures, decision-making processes, and everything. But please, don't forget, if you introduce too much structures, too much like rules, you are ending up in this situation, and usually you build a hierarchical organization. What is disadvantage with this organization, or this type of the phase of the company? Usually you have a very clear decision lines, all rules in place, but the company is moving slowly because everything is structured and you have a kind of fixed strategy. It does not allow the business agility and flexibility which comes from startup, but you want to keep that agility, right? You want to grow the company, but still be quickly moving and have that agility and flexibility. That's why it's so important that you define a clear vision for the company, for the whole team. What is the vision of the company, the direction where we are going? Because working with the vision and the leadership style that is called intent-based leadership, where instead of telling people exactly what they should do, you define the wanted outcomes and give teams who are specialists in their domains. You are not a specialist as a generalist on a high managerial position. You give them power that they find the best strategy. So maybe it's not going to be fixed strategy, they're going to move, but they're all moving to the same direction. And it's something that I really recommend. I met company who worked in that way. It's nothing new. It has been known for many, many years. They did everything that, but failed again. Why? Even if you do all those tasks and define KPIs and goals, there is an additional thing which is very, very important. That the senior leadership team always set what is the highest focus, prioritization, when you have a lot of projects. Because if you don't set the focus like those 3 or 5 projects or initiatives are the most important, then you're not going to have that alignment. It's also important to bear for people who are in a managerial roles. Everything that you do, it's following you like a shadow. So the way how you behave, if you can't agree in your leadership team from the company perspective, what are 5 the most important product initiatives for the company, you can't expect that your teams are going to know that. I met many companies that leadership teams knew now we should decide 10 most important initiatives. They were sitting in a room for many hours and left room without decision. So it's so important, of course, those priorities, and that's why I said you should have a deep limit on the number of prioritized initiatives. Because if you have or another typical mistake, you define the priorities, but then you're coming, oh, there is a new initiative, it's also, oh, what is the prio? Highest prio, of course, but can we replace something here? No. And then it's coming another initiative, it's also highest. You can't have 20 highest priorities initiatives at the company. And the last but not the least, I saved the best for the last, technology. Some typical mistakes which companies are doing during the rapid growth phase. You have a lot of initiatives, everything is going well. You are building a lot of POCs, proof of concepts, MVPs, and then business people are coming and so they say, oh, is it working? And then whoosh, it's already delivered in production. Did it happen to you that the MVP or POC got delivered to deployed to the production? Because no one has the time to wait. Now it creates a business value. Please be patient or persuade business people or whoever force you to deploy MVP into production, to build a prototype, to implement that properly and then go live with that. Another thing that is typical for the companies who are growing, for them it's so important to start receiving return of investments and revenue, right? That they can continue growing. And usually fast time to market is very important. It's for any company, but especially for a smaller company, especially which are got just the money from investors, or is just looking how do you deliver things and so on. What does it mean for the technology? Usually those things become like, oh, just this solution, one-offs in the system. You don't think about the whole and how it will fit the whole target architecture or tech strategy. So it results in one-off solutions, fragmented architecture, not standardized tech solution. And directly it creates tech debt and tech sprawl across the system that is so difficult then to rework. So, of course, some things, and usually I talk about strategic decisions and tactic solutions. Strategic, it means you set some strategy and you know we are going toward that direction because it's going to lead us to success. But along the way, the real life demands from you that sometimes you do some tactical solutions. Oh, just for this market we are going to do differently, just for this customer. But it's normal, it's the business. But all the time you need to keep a good balance between those strategic solutions and tactical solutions. If you have too many tactical solutions, one-offs in the system, it will lead in a big tech debt and missed revenue. I used to illustrate that like that you have those like two scenarios. Strategic solutions, you set your strategy and you are executing a strategy, and by doing some tactical solution, the final state that there will be some gap from the initial strategy, but if that gap is small, then it's fine. But if tactical solutions create such a big gap compared to the final vision, then you will end with a lot of problems. So mind that gap between strategic and tactical solutions. When we are talking about a lot of innovative projects and innovation and trying out things, when it happens that the senior leadership team are just telling you, oh, please, we need to pause all the projects, everything implementation code stays in the system. You just switch off the solution, right? If you don't clean your code regularly, even if some part of the code base is not active, you need to maintain all those code lines forever. So be consistent that you are cleaning up your code or new technologies when the project is paused or you see it's not going to be like continued. Don't forget to do that. So optimize, remove, clean up unused code and technology regularly. Then when you work with technology, you realize it's equally much about psychology. It's not only about technology. Many companies which became very successful, I don't know if we have any psychologists in the room, but I think something happens in the brain and then you feel like, now whatever what I deliver, it's going to be success. And you start focusing on wrong things. You don't focus on your core products, which are give you competitive advantage. You think, oh, we can do everything. We can build our payment system. We can build our CRM. We can build a multiplayer platform, although it's not our core value proposition. Usually what happens, you invest in those things instead of just buying third-party products. Many years later, you just realize we didn't succeed with that. And it's normal because there are some other companies which have that as the main product. And of course, they're much better than you. And those projects becomes just sunk costs and it's not good for you. So my recommendation is always focus on the things that really create your competitive advantage. What are your core products? Everything that you can buy on the market is a third-party product, do that. Security, when you grow, it's so typical that you are doing a lot of shortcuts just in order to deliver the product. But what happens when the company grows? It's not only that the company is bigger, but usually it's more attractive on the market. So you're much easier exposed to the hackers and the other non-authorized actors in the system. So think about that. Maybe it's okay for first startup phase, but then shift left and build DevSecOps practices. And also scalable tech. When you have a big plans that you want to implement such big generic solutions. No, focus on your customers. Ask your business people to define SLOs, ever budgets, to understand your users, so that you don't start building something that is completely huge and not useful and will cost you time and money. What we are doing at FlyTrader, in order to solve those technical capabilities or technical challenges, we decided to adopt something that is called always be shipping principles, that everything that you build, you do small changes and assure that changes are safe, fast, and measurable. And then you can easily detect if you are going in the wrong direction. For people who are born before 2001, I can say it's a new version of the Agile Manifesto, how you should ship your software in a small chunks and continuously. For people who are born after that, we can say it's always be shipping principle. And consists of 5 principles. First, that you ship continuously, small, frequent releases, that you automate everything. So, because everything that you need to do manually will leave some like dependency or on-off, one-off in your system. Modular by design. If the architecture is modular, then it's easy to switch on, switch off, remove some things. It's easy to modify the things. Everything should be feedback driven. Then you know if you are on the right track. And speed and quality will give you the competitive advantage. And before I wrap up this talk, there is a final thing that is very important to bear in mind. There is that delayed effect in revenue drop decline. If everything is going well, revenue continues to grow, and you see that, oh, but we are building our complex organization and so on, and you try to like tell people maybe we should change the things, but they're saying, no, you see the revenue is doing so fine, why should we change? Just keep doing that. No, you should react as soon as you see some of all those mentioned signals that I went through today, because when revenue starts being red, then it's too late to change things. So you need to catch all those signals much before that. Have you heard about the watermelon project thing? In fact, it happened to me at one company. Everything was going so well. We were aware, like, oh, maybe we will do too complex organization and so on. But we were looking at the revenue, everyone's doing fine. Portfolio project is going, everything felt so green. And one day, we just cut in the and realized all projects are delayed. It was so much red things inside. So bear that in mind. Just checking that the revenue is still doing fine, there is no guarantee because there is that delayed effect. And the very final slide, just to summarize what I would like that you bring from my talk today. Organizational structure, think about that building horizontally scaled, scaling out organization. Don't build too many layers and managerial layers. Business, bear in mind when you decide about innovation and projects to think also about market situation. Leadership, you should aim for that business agility. Intent-based leadership, working with vision, defining wanted outcomes, and letting specialists, experts team to find the strategy and to deliver on plans. And technology, follow, my warm recommendation is to follow those always be shipping principles. So that's all from me today. Yes, we can continue during the networking.
Yeah,
Yes?
thank you so much, Mina. I'm blown away. Such a good presentation. So concrete what to do and not to do. Really good.
of course, bear in mind it's only my perspective, but as I said, my brain has been trained on many companies that repeated the same mistakes. So I learned a lot, and that's why I wanted to share that with you.
Fantastic. And there's plenty of food, plenty of drinks outside. We will have a small Q&A now.